So I feel as if this is a particularly good day to record a video like this. I'm in the house by myself. It's really peaceful, and I'm feeling relaxed. I just, had a shower and a nice breakfast, and it's a beautiful day. Here I'm in the Irish countryside, which is where I live, and it's just, the sort of day which, as an introvert, as a sensitive person, just really feeds my soul and contributes to my sense of well-being. And so I thought it was a really great occasion to make a video like this. And I hope the advice and tips that I have to offer in this video will help other sensitive souls who, like myself, struggle with overstimulation, exhaustion, just a feeling that the world is too much and that you can't seem to quite protect yourself from the many kind of stimuli and forces coming at you all the time. And so let's just start off the video explaining what do I mean by an introverted sensitive person, and who are the kinds of people who might be drawn to a video like this, whom this might resonate with, who might be helped by this sort of discussion. And I think I am particularly able to speak on this topic because I would definitely include myself in this group of people. I am an introverted person, and for those who don't know, an introvert is someone who has a very strong and vibrant inner world, and they derive their energy and sense of well-being more from being on their own than they do from other people. They find interactions with others to drain them of energy, and they find that being by themselves tends to replenish their energy. Now that's in stark contrast to an extroverted person who gains energy from being around others. They actually draw energy from other people and from interactions with other people. And their world is mostly external. Everything, for a very extroverted person, everything that is inside is immediately externalized. Whereas for an introvert, it's very much the opposite way around. They take in stimulus and it's all internalized. And in order to kind of deal with everything that's going on inside them, they need to be by themselves because they find other people to be kind of distracting, and it drains their energy levels right down. And introversion and extroversion exist on a spectrum. You might have people who are more on the extreme side of introversion and people who are more on the extreme side of extroversion. And you can get everything in between those two extremes. You get ambiverts who are sort of what we would call right down the middle of that spectrum. And they have qualities of both the introvert and extroverts within them. But I would consider myself to be someone who is fairly fairly on the extreme side of introversion. And maybe this describes you as well, and perhaps you have also identified that you tend to find social interactions to be draining, and you can only handle them in certain quantities. People who are very extroverted can be around others almost 24/7, and they derive a great deal of satisfaction from that. People who are introverts absolutely require alone time, or at least time with just a few, maybe just one or two trusted close people in order just to recharge their batteries. I think there's a common misconception about introverts that they are shy or quiet, or that they don't enjoy social interaction. And none of those stereotypes are actually true. Um, Introverts can actually enjoy social interaction tremendously, and they might derive, a great deal of enjoyment out of relationships with people and out of interactions with people. It's simply that they can't partake in those social interactions to the same extent that an extrovert can, because it drains them of energy so much more quickly. So they might enjoy their friendships and relationships enormously, and they might value those interactions greatly as well. They might even be the sort of person who takes great delight in parties and social gatherings, but then finds that they can, only keep going for a certain amount of time before they have to go home and rest and, be by themselves for a bit. So that is the chief difference between an introvert and an extrovert. And if you are introverted, I think it's pretty easy to see why you would find the world at large to be more draining than an extrovert would. The world which is full of people and, their the many stimuli that come from people is obviously more draining to an introvert. Um, the other aspect to this is the aspect of sensitivity. Now, I personally consider myself to be a very sensitive person as well. What does that mean? It just means that you are much more susceptible to stimuli that excite your five senses. So, bright lights, noises, um, harsh textures, um, intense smells, um, strong tastes. All these sorts of things tend to be more kind of annoying or more of a problem for a sensitive person. So in my case, I'm pretty sensitive to bright light, and I'm also very sensitive to noise, and that has, caused issues for me throughout my life. I'm aware of needing to be in a fairly peaceful environment most of the time, and that definitely is especially important when it comes to where I live. I can't really deal with very loud noises, um, that go on for too long when I'm in my home or when I'm in my work environment, which is where I also spend a lot of time. So I need to be in a fairly peaceful environment most of the time. Maybe you relate to that. Maybe you're someone who is more sensitive to things like fabrics that you wear, or you know, strong smells, things like that. Those kinds of things don't bother me as much. I'm more sensitive to, as I say, bright lights and noises than probably the average person. For example, at work, I can't have the lights, on over my desk. It's one of those big fluorescent lights, and I start to see stars and have the megering within moments of it being on. So I have to have that off most of the time. That's just an example. But likely, if you are a sensitive person, you probably have noticed that you're sensitive to certain stimuli. Another aspect that sensitive people are often sensitive to is the energy and behavior of other people, the feelings of other people. A lot of sensitive people are incredibly aware of other people's moods and feelings and their responses, and you're taking in that information all the time. Um, you might even be what's called an empath. So you might be incredibly sensitive to the suffering and pain in the world, and just be incredibly in tune with how other people are feeling. And that can cause, I think it's pretty easy to see why that can cause fatigue as well. It just means that there's constantly stimuli coming at you that you're having to process all the time. And if you put all these things together, being introvert, which means that you get drained by social interactions and that you need to spend time on your own. If you are sensitive, which means that your your five senses are more on high alert than the average person. If you are empathic, meaning you're extremely sensitive to other people's pain and suffering and feelings, and you're just constantly picking up on the cues of other people. If you put all those things together into one person, I think it's not difficult to see why the world can be an almost unbearable place to live sometimes. And why it can almost feel impossible to get the level of rest and recharge that you need in order to feel healthy and okay in yourself. And this has been my experience for my entire life. And I have, over the years, become just better and better at protecting myself and handling myself in the world in such a way that my mental, emotional, and physical health is not jeopardized too much. And, that I keep myself happy and contented and fairly relaxed most of the time. I mean, I think a certain amount of overstimulation is almost inevitable because, just by virtue of living in the world and having to deal with certain situations, there just are going to be times when you're not going to be able to completely avoid overstimulation and exhaustion. But you can mitigate the damage and you can put into place strategies to help you recover a lot more quickly. And that's what I hope to help you with in this video. So I hope that you can learn from my experience. I'm not a mental health professional. I'm not an expert in this area, except to say that this is something that has been my own lived experience for my whole life. And I've been just absolutely determined to make my way through the world without compromising my mental, emotional, and physical health. And, also not shutting off parts of myself. I still want to be able to be my introverted, sensitive self in the world. I don't want to be someone else. These sides of me, being introverted and sensitive, empathic, they're qualities I greatly value in myself, and I don't want them to change. So the challenge has been how to move through the world and how to handle situations in such a way that I can still be true to myself and yet also protect myself from excessive exhaustion and overstimulation. So I'm going to run through the major things that I have put into place in my life in order to help me with this. And I hope that you can implement at least some of these, if not all of them. I encourage you to try and implement more and more of them over time. And of course, to explore methods that might work better for you. I'm not saying that what works for me will necessarily work for you, and it might not always be possible in all situations either. I encourage you to do your own research and to listen to yourself above all else, because your own feelings and your own body and your own mind and heart are going to be the very, very best indicators of what you should be doing and where you should be paying attention to. So, play around with this, experiment with it, maybe use my suggestions as a starting point, and then just see what works well for you, what makes you feel better, and what other solutions you might find out there. There are a lot of great resources on the internet and on YouTube, and a therapist or a counselor can also be a great resource to give you suggestions. But here's what has worked for me. The first strategy and I would say is the most important, is to look at the major areas of your life. And by that I mean the places and situations where you spend the most time, and try to make them as supportive as possible. So the major areas I would say would be, firstly, your home, where you live. Then your work environment would be the second most important, I would say, and closely followed by your primary relationship. Meaning, if you are in a serious monogamous relationship with someone, that is obviously going to play a massive role in your sense of well-being, and that's going to be where a lot of your energy goes. So that is a huge area to look at as well. So home, work environment, your primary relationship. From there, I would look at, other aspects which are also very important, but maybe not as important as those three, would be your friendships, your family relationships, your hobbies, sports and interests that you might be participating in, diet, exercise, sleep. Actually, all of those are very important, and definitely need to be paid attention to. But I would focus on home, work, and primary relationship first, because I think, in my experience, those are going to have the biggest impact. And it might be slightly different for you. Different things might take priority in your life. Your life might obviously not look exactly the same as mine. But I think in most people's lives, home, work, and primary relationships are the things that contribute the most to our sense of well-being. So for an introverted, sensitive person, a peaceful home is going to play a massive, massive role in your sense of well-being on a day-to-day basis. That's where you sleep, that's where you retreat to from the world. That's the place where you take care of yourself. You feed yourself, you bathe yourself, you dress yourself. You know, that's where you relax in a lot of cases. So try to make your home environment as peaceful and harmonious as possible. I would suggest choosing a home in a quiet area that is a home that is quiet most of the time. And you might want to just decide for yourself what level of noise and disruption you can handle in your home. This might be slightly different for every person, but just use your own stress levels as a guide. I'm the sort of person, as soon as there are very loud noises that I can't control, I start to get a bit anxious. And so I know I can't have too much of that in my home. For me, I enjoy living in the countryside. I like being able to look out of the window at greenery. I like the peacefulness and the space around me that the countryside affords. It's important for me to have animals nearby, and birds singing in the trees, and have pets, dogs and cats. And those factors all provide a very sort of calming influence in my life. And so I would, as I say, if you don't already live in a peaceful home, I would just strongly recommend that you investigate that. And I think you'll be amazed at how much that will contribute to your sense of well-being as an introverted and sensitive person. And it doesn't need to be something expensive. I have lived in many different houses over the course of my life, And for much of that time, I've been a single woman, or a woman living by myself, or I haven't had a lot of money, or both. And there have been many times I've had to get creative about where I live, so that I can still live in a peaceful home and stay within my budget. So I would encourage you to just keep thinking creatively, even if you feel that it's, a peaceful home is not something you can afford. There are always options um, to, to do that in a fairly cost-effective way. And I would say it's the kind of thing that you could even explore the option of moving to a different town or city. That's something you could even seriously consider if it means that you'd be able to save money and still, and live in a peaceful environment. It is that important, I believe. And if you are kind of, let's say, unable to move for whatever reason for the time being, and your home is not peaceful, and there are things that you can do in order to create a greater sense of peace within your environment. Um, White noise machines are a great tool. You can buy them fairly cheaply on Amazon, and they create sounds of waterfalls or rain or wind that can be very soothing if you're sensitive. And they can even help you sleep at night. I used to have, when I lived in a slightly noisier house, I used to have my white noise machine on my bedside table, and I had it set for half an hour when I would go to sleep, and it would play the sound of rain. And I just found it to be very comforting as I was going to sleep. And it helped to remove the sense of stress that I would feel from hearing small noises, that could wake me up as I was trying to go to sleep. And so white noise machines are a great tool that I would recommend. Having plants in your house is also a wonderful way to introduce a sense of peace. Greenery has been shown to absorb a certain amount of noise, and it's been shown to have a very calming effect on human beings. So flowers, indoor plants. If you have a garden area or a patio or balcony, getting some plants can really create a sense of peace as well, and it can start to restore some of the energy that the world takes out of you. As I mentioned earlier, having pets is also a great way to restore your sense of peace. Animals tend to have a very soothing effect on us. Pets, caring for pets, stroking pets, the affection and love that we get from pets is very soothing, and it's shown to have health benefits and to be good for our mental and emotional well-being. Right, so I'd also encourage you to think about furnishings and colors in your home that feel good to you. Maybe think less about what's fashionable or what might be kind of the preferences of other people, and try to at least have one or two spaces in your home, if not your entire home, that is just has furniture and fabrics and colors that feel good to you. If you're anything like me, you might like art on the walls. I love to, put art up around my house because it feels very soothing and calming. I'm just looking over at a piece of art that's in my kitchen of a cottage by the English seaside with a field of flowers next to it. It's just a very soothing thing to look at. And you can get art very cheaply at secondhand shops. You don't need to spend a lot of money, but incorporate things that speak to you personally and that feed your soul and that just feel good and that make you happy, that bring a smile to your face into your home, and make it into a sanctuary. I really encourage you to look at your home as an oasis where you can retreat from the world and recharge your batteries. Um, and, make sure that you have at least a few comfortable chairs or sofas in your house where you can, just sink into and relax with some comfy blankets. Um, you might want to have, if you're like me and you're sensitive to noise a bit and you need to drown out any unpleasant noises, you might want to explore videos on YouTube that which have recorded white noise that you can play in your house, or classical music, or any music that is, soothing to you. It can be very helpful to drown out noises that are unpleasant or distressing. Um, Having podcasts on in your house can also help you to get kind of lost in your own head whilst you're at home. And that can be a very rejuvenating experience as well, because it pulls your focus back inward instead of forcing you to be constantly externalizing your focus, which for an introverted sensitive person can be very draining. It certainly is for me. And so anything that helps me to just kind of pull back into myself and redirect my focus inside and let me get lost and absorbed in my own inner world is tremendously soothing and beneficial for me, and might be for you as well. Let's move on to work, which is possibly arguably the most tricky of these areas to to turn into a supportive environment. But it is very important to pay attention to your work environment because we spend so much time at work. And so I'd encourage you to look at things like, the people that you work with. Are they supportive, kind people? Do they stress you out? Do they let you have time to yourself during the day? A very micromanaging boss or a very nosy coworker can be just absolutely, deadly for an introverted, sensitive person. That can be a source of great stress because introverts, sensitive people really need to be left alone for parts of the day, just to get on with things, just to get absorbed in what they're doing. So I would encourage you to really steer clear of people who are not going to give you that space in your work environment. If possible, try to arrange a workspace for yourself that is a little bit away from any kind of chaos or excessive interaction with people within your work environment. You might be able to organize a little cubicle for yourself that has kind of enclosures around you so that you don't have to be facing other people too much. You might even be lucky enough to get your own office. These are all aspects that I encourage you to look into when you are considering a work environment. And I would also encourage you to look very closely before you accept a job or before you apply, decide to go into a particular kind of career or apply for a job. Really think about how much people-facing time you're going to have to be involved in that job. Are you going to be having to answer the phones a lot? Are you going to be having to deal with customers and clients a lot? Are you going to have to be involved in a lot of meetings? Are you going to be having to confer with your co-workers a lot? All of these things are things to look into and just to establish um, how much of that you feel able to handle. At what point do you think you will start to, you know, feel stressed? It's important to be really honest with yourself about that, because that feeling of stress from being forced into situations where you're having to interact with people too much, or where you're in a very chaotic environment, that will eventually lead to burnout if you don't address it. So burnout is a very real and serious issue for introverts and sensitive people. And it's certainly something that I've dealt with myself and that I've had to come to grips with many times. Oh, excuse me. I am so sorry about that. It's something I've had to take very seriously when I think about my working life. Um, I would encourage you to uh, make full use of any annual leave, time off that you are entitled to at your job. A lot of people just tend to push through until the end of the year and then find that they have all this, um, you know, paid vacation or leave accrued to them and that they haven't taken. Or else they might take it in one massive block, over Christmas time. They get busy with family and maybe going away on holiday, and they tend to neglect themselves. And so I just really encourage you not to fall into that trap. If possible, schedule, regular short breaks throughout the year for yourself. Even if it's just a long weekend, every couple of months, or just a day off in the middle of the week here and there, or if possible, try to take a whole week off um, a couple of times a year. And make sure that when you are taking that time off, that you don't overcommit yourself to other people and events and going away for too much. Make sure that you keep a good portion of your time off for yourself, not because you want to be selfish, but because it's just absolutely a necessity for an introverted, sensitive person. It's a need, as much as sleep and eating and breathing is a need. Time to recharge is a need. Otherwise, if you don't get that regular resting time, and by that I mean, more than just your 8 hours of sleep a night, but actually, and more than a weekend also, but actually days off from work, so that you can just, completely recharge your physical and mental health. And that will give you the energy to continue. If you let it get to a point where you're totally frazzled and stressed and exhausted, as I say, you are at risk for burnout and for feelings of tremendous unhappiness and even depression. And I speak from experience with this. So just make sure that you are taking your time off that you're entitled to, and try to choose a company or an employer that is going to be supportive of that. Um, and if possible, if you are lucky enough to work for an employer who allows you to be flexible with your working hours and with your working environment, if you're one of those lucky people where your employer allows you to work from home for part of the week, or to change up your working hours so that they just suit your personality or your lifestyle a little bit better. I highly encourage you to make use of that, and don't feel guilty about it. Just know that it is absolutely okay to prioritize yourself in this way. I think one of the great things that's actually come out of the COVID pandemic, obviously the pandemic was an awful thing, but one of the positive things that's come out of it is that employers more and more are, since the pandemic, more and more people, more and more employers are willing to let their employees work a more flexible schedule, either part of the week from home or you know, having reduced hours, all this sort of thing. I've recently negotiated with my employer to work 4 days a week instead of 5. And the feeling of relief and well-being that I got from that decision has been absolutely massive. So I would just encourage you to explore that with your employer if possible. And I know that might not always be possible. And so if that isn't possible, incorporate other ways to make sure that you're getting rest during the day, and make sure that you take your full lunch break and that you're entitled to in the middle of the day. Make sure you always take your tea break if you're entitled to that, which you should be really. Don't skip it and think, oh, well, I'll just work through. Try and get into a discipline of taking your allotted time off, because even if you don't realize that at the time, it really just does contribute to your overall well-being in the end. So let's move on to the importance of having a supportive primary relationship or intimate relationship, which I have actually spoken about in a previous video. For me, this has been a real game changer as an anxious person, as an introverted, sensitive person. Having a supportive partner is just so, so, so important. I can't overstate the importance of this. If you have a partner who is causing you chaos, who is constantly draining your energy and forcing you to interact in ways that don't feel good to you, who's not respectful of your need for rest and downtime, and for recharging your batteries, and for spending your time in such a way that you are filling up your tank, which is which gets depleted by the world. So it's very important to spend time filling your tank up again, and you need to be with a partner who understands that, or at the very least is respectful of it and is willing to work with you to find a routine that works for your sensitive introverted nature. Some extroverts, believe it or not, are actually really good at understanding that introverts are different from them. So, and an introvert-extrovert relationship can actually work quite well if you have the sort of relationship where the extrovert is happy to go out and do things and interact and socialize on their own, and let you spend more time on your own. It doesn't try to force you to socialize with them. Or you might have a situation, which I've also heard of some couples doing, where you go to a social gathering in 2 different cars, and the extrovert stays longer and the introvert comes home when they feel ready to come home. And I think that can work really well. I think you really need to be willing to think outside of the box and coming up with solutions that are going to work for both of you. As I say, I know of relationships that work extremely well where the more extroverted person participates in events and social gatherings on their own, and doesn't force their introverted partner to come with them. And the introverted partner is sort of more happy to stay at home, and they don't have to have as much togetherness. And that can be perfectly valid and perfectly wonderful, actually, for a relationship. Don't feel as an introverted, sensitive person that you need to be joined at the hip to your partner. You are more valuable to them over the long run if you can find a way to work, with your nature and with the way that you authentically are. And if you can find a lifestyle with them that supports both of you. But of course, another option is to choose an introverted partner, someone who also has a need for alone time, and so they will much more easily understand your need for alone time and your need to have time to recharge your batteries, and that can work really well too. That's what I have with my fiance. He's also an introvert, and so not only do both of us not have a high need to socialize out in the world, but we also understand that each of us kind of also needs to go to our respective caves sometimes. And then we also spend part of the evening together. So there's a balance, and it works very well for us. Um, and of course, in addition to having a partner who understands your introverted nature, and your sensitivity, um, I think it's also very important to have a partner who's gentle and kind. Arguments and turmoil and instability in a house and in a relationship is very draining to an introverted, sensitive person. It can really, really knock you out if you are constantly having to field issues and disagreements with your partner. So, um, I would really, really strongly encourage you to choose a partner. I feel like a broken record at this point because I seem to say this in almost every video, but choose a partner who's loving, who's respectful, who's going to, be really conducive to living a peaceful life so that your energy is not just constantly being leached out by having to put out fires in your relationship. Let's cover the other areas that I said were also important, but maybe not as important as those three areas. Oh, I'm so sorry, I keep knocking the microphone. But let's cover these other areas as well because they are also, important. And I would really encourage you to give them, a lot of attention as well. So let's start with family relationships. Now, everyone's family dynamics are different, so I don't want to be too prescriptive here. You might have a family who is very supportive and very understanding of your specific needs as an introverted and sensitive person. And if that is the case, I'm thrilled for you. You're probably one of the lucky ones. Or, you may come from a family who's also, introverted themselves, which is great. And so you might have a very, supportive family, which is wonderful. Or you might have a family that's a bit more difficult and demanding, who don't maybe understand you all that well. It's very common if you are an introverted, sensitive person, you will be in the minority of people. And so the majority of people won't really understand you or your needs. They might not understand your need for alone time, your need to have things peaceful, why certain things bother you, because, they are not the same way. And it's common for that sort of misunderstanding to come from our family as well. So in terms of your family relationships, it can go different ways depending on what kind of family you have and depending on the level of understanding that your family has of you and your needs and your specific nature. And if I haven't already mentioned it in this video, I think it is very important as a starting point to just begin to identify what your needs are and try to get really clear about, what you need in order to feel happy and relaxed and okay mentally, physically, emotionally as a sensitive introverted person. You might even want to be quite specific in terms of I need an hour or two every evening by myself just to relax, read a book, listen to a podcast, do some gardening, whatever it might be. And you might need a day on the weekend also to yourself, where you can just, pursue your own hobbies and interests, or, just be on your own and relax and do some creative writing or whatever it is that you like to do. But try to get really specific about what your needs are and also about what you feel you can handle. And that will give you a really good starting point to begin to see where the various pieces of your life fit in to those needs. So when it comes to family, you might have a family that meets every single Sunday for lunch. And it might be an expectation in your family that the entire family gathers for Sunday lunch every single week, and you all eat together, and then you talk together, and you're there for several hours, and then everyone goes home in the evening. That might be a routine in your family, it might be a tradition, and it might be an expectation that you are expected to participate in. But as an introverted, sensitive person who needs time on your own, who already finds the world quite overwhelming, that might be too much for you. In my case, that would be too much of a demand for me. I can't really handle that every single week, or that wouldn't be something I could appease my family on every week, if that were the case. And so whatever your specific family expectations are that your family has of you, I just really encourage you to weigh up those expectations and see whether you feel like you can meet them or not. And be really honest with yourself. Don't feel that just because your family has an expectation of you, that automatically means you need to fulfill it. We can still love and respect and appreciate the people in our lives without giving them everything that they might want from us. And as a sensitive and introverted person, you are going to have to get comfortable with saying no to people sometimes. You're going to have boundaries with the people in your life, because your energy is finite and you need to conserve it, and you can't be running yourself ragged all the time. Otherwise, you'll have nothing left. So I would encourage you to do a kind of assessment of your family relationships, what your family seem to want or expect from you, and what you feel like you can actually deliver on. And gradually, if you don't feel comfortable with, just enforcing all of that straight away, like say if you've been going to family lunch every single Sunday for the last 10 years, and perhaps you don't feel comfortable with immediately, not going to Sunday lunch, you could start by just leaving an hour or two earlier than you normally do. And then maybe, gradually you could miss the occasional Sunday until you finally get your routine down to a level that you actually feel you can maintain and that is workable for you. And you might get a bit of resistance from your family when you first start to perhaps pull away a little bit in order just to take care of your own needs. They might question you or not understand or not be very happy with you, and you might feel a bit of guilt about that. But I just would encourage you just to consider this. You can't pour from an empty cup. And if you are exhausting yourself in order to try and please other people, including your family, you will eventually drain, what energy you have. And, it might adversely affect your relationships with your family when that happens. So just try to think of it more as conserving your energy over the long run and avoiding burnout, and that is actually going to be more beneficial to your relationships in the long run. Your family, however much it might feel weird to them at first when you maybe are not as involved in family activities as everyone else, or as they might want you to be, they might find it strange at first, but they will get used to it. And you can even open up discussions with them about why you need to, not be as involved or not be as available as they might want you to be. And if they, truly love you, if they're trying to understand you, if they're open to understanding you, they can actually open the door to them getting to know you better, you and your needs. And And this has been my experience. Even if you think, gosh, there's no way that my family members will ever understand this, you know, it's worth it to try. It's worth it to try and explain to them. You could say something like, Mom, I think I'm going to just leave a little early today because I'm tired. I've had a long week, and I just I'm going to go home and look after myself, so that I can prepare for the coming week. You can start off by saying very innocuous things like that, so that they just get used to the idea that you also need to take care of yourself and that you need to rest. And gradually you can work up to having perhaps more direct conversations about how you're an introverted person, and that, you have need for alone time and it's very important to your mental health. And you can start saying things like that, and you'd actually be surprised how much people are capable of understanding. So, you might even be lucky enough to have family members who are open to reading articles that you send them about introversion and about being sensitive and about being empathic. That would be a minority of cases, I think, but you might have the odd family member who is actually willing to learn more about what your, specific needs are as an introverted, sensitive person. Friendships can be handled in a very similar way. I think when it comes to friends, we have a lot more, obviously, a lot more choice about who we allow into our lives as friends. With family, obviously, we're born into the family that we have, but friends, we can actually choose. And I would encourage you to just think about the impact that your various friendships have on you, on your mental health. How understanding and supportive are the friends in your life, and just to perhaps prioritize friendships accordingly. I personally always tend to prioritize friends who show more empathy and understanding of my needs as an introverted, sensitive person, who are more open to understanding me, who are more kind of respectful of who I am authentically. Those tend to be the friendships that I prioritize. And I tend to spend less time with people who are kind of oblivious to my needs as an introverted person, a sensitive person. I don't tend to have those kinds of friendships in my life, because they provide very little benefit to me. I tend to kind of require a certain level of understanding and sensitivity and respect from the friends that I have. And that's something you might want to think about. How do your friendships make you feel as an introverted person, as a sensitive person? Do your friendships drain you, or do they leave you feeling, contented and understood and loved and respected when you leave those interactions? That is a huge, huge clue as to where you should be putting your priority and your energy in terms of your friendships. And similarly, you can start to open up a dialogue with your friends about your needs as an introverted person. Hopefully, they will be open to at least listening to you and perhaps trying to understand. And that will make your job that much easier when you try to put in boundaries and when you need to decline invitations, or you need to just, withdraw from social gatherings. It'll make it that much easier if your friends already have some sort of understanding of your needs, and they will, be much more receptive when you try to just put in those boundaries. So that's just something I encourage you to think about a lot. The next really big thing I want to talk about is sleep, because sleep is so, so, so important. Well, just to human beings in general. It's important to creatures, all creatures on Earth, but it's really important to an introverted and sensitive person. because obviously sleep is the time when our bodies heal, our minds process information and kind of prepare us to face the next day. And it's so important that you're getting enough quality sleep in your life. And again, I just encourage you to think about how much sleep feels good to you. You know, this whole accepted norm of 8 hours a night has actually been shown to be just quite a random number, and not all people find that 8 hours of sleep is enough. I'm one of those people that I tend to need to be in bed for at least 9 to 9.5 hours every night. If I tried to exist on just 8 hours of sleep a night, I would start to burn out and become stressed. And so sleep is incredibly important for your physical and mental health. And if you are a sensitive person, if you are an introverted person who tends to get drained by the world, you might find that you need a bit more sleep than the average person. And I would encourage you to really try and meet that need for yourself. Whether that means, going to bed earlier than you would normally go to bed, or maybe waking up a bit later in the mornings. If possible, just examine your particular lifestyle and try to make sure that as much as possible you are meeting your own individual quota of sleep that you need in order to feel good and to feel rested and relaxed. It can make such a huge difference to the way that you feel and to your ability to deal with stimuli out in the world if you are well rested. When you're not rested enough, things get to you and annoy you much more quickly. You reach overstimulation a lot more quickly. You get exhausted more quickly. You tend to get cranky more quickly. Things overwhelm you more easily when you're not rested. So I really can't overstate the importance of getting enough sleep. In terms of the quality of your sleep, that's obviously equally important. Make sure that you have a comfortable bed, that you are the right temperature, not too hot and not too cold. Just work out what feels right for your body. You might want to have a window open in your bedroom. I saw that suggested as a way to get, a good night's sleep. Make sure that you have a free flow of fresh air into your room. If that makes you cold, make sure you have a nice warm duvet or blankets, and just work out what the correct temperature is for you so that you can get a good night's sleep. I recently put a mattress topper on my mattress in order to make it more comfortable, and that has improved the quality of my sleep as well. I like to have a glass of water next to my bed so I don't get thirsty during the night. Things like that. Make sure your room is quiet. Make sure that there's not too much light coming in, that it's dark enough that you can get a good night's sleep, and just continuously experiment until you get the environment just right so that you can get the quality and the amount of sleep that you need in order to function as an introverted, sensitive person. I don't want to say too much about diets because that's going to be so unique and individual to each person. But again, this is something that can play a big role in our sense of well-being. You want to make sure that you're well nourished and eating food that agrees with you. If you're a sensitive person, you might be more sensitive, as I say, to tastes and smells. You might have a more sensitive digestive system, and so you just want to make sure that you're eating food that is nourishing your body, that makes you feel good, that makes you, it supports your overall health and your sense of feeling good inside your own body. Whatever that means to you, I just encourage you to explore it and just find your own, comfort level, your own sense of what seems to be right for your body. Listen to your own body. I'm a big believer in that. Listen to your own feelings, listen to your own body. And obviously, consult a dietitian or a doctor if you feel like that would help you or if you're really stuck. But that can make a big difference to your ability to deal with the stimulation out in the world. In fact, all of these things impact in their own way on our ability to be resilient to overstimulation and overwhelm. It's not so much that we want to prevent stimulation from ever coming at us. That's not possible because the world is always going to be full of stimuli. You're not going to be able to shut it out completely. But it's about strengthening yourself so that you can meet that stimuli and be more resilient in the face of it, and that you can recover if you do experience overstimulation and exhaustion, that you can just recover that much more quickly. All of these things, if you have all of these things in place and that you have a really supportive life, all kind of mapped out for you, will allow you to just recover so much more quickly from overstimulation and exhaustion. You'll just get your energy back that much more quickly, and that will lead to a greater sense of mental well-being. And so the last thing I wanted to talk about, or maybe I'll just briefly touch on hobbies and interests in sports, because I do think this is important. Perhaps not as much as the other aspects, because I think it's not difficult to kind of understand that you obviously want to be pursuing hobbies and interests that are enjoyable to you. So that's just something I just think requires a brief mention. Try to, in your spare time, if you are someone who is engaged in various hobbies and sports, make sure that you're following your own enjoyment and your own passion. That is also going to feed your soul as an introverted, sensitive person. When you feel as if you have an outlet for all the, thoughts and, the wonderful richness that lives inside you, when you feel like you can express it to the outside world, that can be an incredibly enjoyable experience for a sensitive or introverted person. So if you are a very sort of visual person, if you see things in pictures in your mind, you might get great enjoyment out of doing photography or out of creating art. If you are someone who loves fluid movement, you might enjoy participating in dance. And if you love to sing, you might get enjoyment out of participating in a theatre club, and so on and so on. But I think as an introverted person, as a sensitive person, we can spend so much time feeling misunderstood in the world. And so it's just that much more important that we look for outlets and for what's going on inside ourselves that can make us feel less like an alien in the world, that we can feel as if we have purpose and that we belong somewhere. And we can be surrounded by people who have similar interests to us. I think this is really important. And that's where, having hobbies and interests or participating in sports can be really valuable for an introverted, sensitive person. Look for things that really just feed your soul and that make you feel, recharged and rejuvenated and happy after you do them. Don't participate in things that make you feel more drained. That obviously is kind of a self-defeating task. So think about what you're passionate about, what's enjoyable to you. It always makes me so sad when I talk to people who say they want to exercise more, and then they say, well, they can't bring themselves to go to the gym, and I'll always think to myself, gosh, I hate the gym as well. I find it a very depressing place. But there are so many other ways to get your body moving that can, just make you feel happy and, exhilarated, like dance, like hiking, like walking, like yoga. There are just so many options, and I would encourage you not to limit yourself. Just explore all your options out there to make sure that you are also, you know, feeding the creative and alternative sides to yourself, that you're becoming a well-rounded person. It's so important, and it can lead to such a sense of well-being as well. So the last aspect I just want to talk about is, I think, possibly the most helpful. No, I won't go that far. It's not the most helpful thing that I'm going to talk about in this video, but I do think it is extremely game changing. And I don't really hear it spoken about too often when I look at advice for overcoming overstimulation and overwhelm and exhaustion for introverted, sensitive people. So, and this is something that I've only recently really realized how important it is, but it is something I've kind of known about for years. And that is the importance of creating a kind of a psychological barrier between yourself and stimuli that has the power to overwhelm you. It's really important that we don't let ourselves be bulldozed by the world as introverted, sensitive people. You need to be able to make it through this life without becoming psychologically and emotionally demolished by the world. And that's how it can sometimes feel when you're an introverted, sensitive person. Like the world is just too much, and it won't stop coming at you, and it won't stop making demands from you. And so it's really important to kind of create this psychological protective field around yourself, so that you are not at the mercy of these various demands and stimuli that might be coming at you. It just makes it so much easier if you have this psychological barrier in place to put in boundaries and to be able to go about your day without feeling like you are just about to be flattened by all the stimuli around you. So it's hard to explain exactly what this psychological barrier is, because it's an abstract concept. So you might just want to close your eyes and think about what that would mean to you. Obviously, it's not a physical barrier. It's something that you visualize for yourself and that you keep in your mind, just in order to protect yourself from all the noise and the energy and the stimuli that's out there. When I think of creating a psychological barrier for myself, I kind of think of myself putting my arms out all around me, 360 degrees around me, and kind of creating this bubble around myself that no one can penetrate. And that is helpful to me when I'm out and about in the world and I'm just interacting with the general public and strangers, or even when I'm at work, with my co-workers. It's helpful to me when I'm having to interact with people that I'm not close to, because it just means that there's this distance between myself and them that allows me not to get overly affected by anything they might be saying or doing. Even questions they might be asking me, or demands they might be trying to make of me, or expectations they might be having. This kind of psychological barrier just protects me from all of that, and I don't actually need to be too affected by what's going on outside of the barrier. And I find just having that visual incredibly helpful, because it really just allows me to tune a lot of it out, a lot of that stimuli out. You're never going to be able to tune it all out. But if you can at least psychologically tune out most of it, so that maybe it's only just a vague kind of a din that's making its way through the barrier, or you're just kind of seeing bits and pieces outside of your psychological barrier. It's not as overwhelming as if everything is just kind of right here, right in your space. That to me is the very, like the thought of everything being right in my space and kind of almost crawling on my skin is an incredibly overwhelming and frightening feeling. And I just find having this kind of force field around myself that in that I visualize nothing can penetrate is very psychologically helpful, and it reduces my anxiety significantly. And you can make that psychological barrier closer, and your bubble can be smaller when you're with someone that you feel very comfortable with. When you're with someone you have some sort of intimate or close relationship with, you don't have to worry so much about the psychological bubble. That kind of barrier or bubble or force field is just there to protect you from people who maybe just don't understand you, or stimulation that you can't control. But when you're in your safe environment, when you're at home, or when you're with close friends, or your partner, or close family, that people who are respectful of your needs, you can kind of let that guard down a bit. And I just encourage you to play with that. Think about what your psychological barrier would look like to you. You can even visualize it, as I say, like a bubble that surrounds you. Maybe there's soft music playing inside that bubble. Maybe, the temperature inside it is just right. It just might be this lovely kind of cocoon that you visualize for yourself. That's it just can be a very helpful psychological tool to protect you from factors on the outside that can overstimulate you. You'd be surprised how powerful our mind can be in fighting the effects of overstimulation. If you can somehow turn down the volume inside your own head of the stimulation that's out there, if you can just visualize it as being less impactful, then it can, really reduce how much it can affect you. So, as I said, I don't claim to be an expert on any of that, but that has been incredibly helpful for me. And I hope that it's helpful for you as well. I hope that some of these tips help to bring you some peace and help you to really win the battle against overstimulation, because believe me, I know incredibly well what that struggle can be like, and how difficult it can make life feel at times. But it can be won, and it can be overcome, and you can turn your life into a place that feels supportive and feels as if it's working for you and not against you. So I hope you can take some encouragement from this video, and I will see you next time. Bye everyone.